This game by Karpov shows that in the open Sicilian, it is not necessary to win with sharp sacrifices or crazy attacks. You can often play positional chess and still be quite successful. Black chose the Najdorf variation. So bishop e2 is a line that Karpov used to play against Najdorf, and he played it quite successfully. e5 is Black's most popular choice. If he wanted to transpose to Scheveningen, he could have played e6 instead. Queen d2 is the line which was made popular by Karpov, and he won several very nice games in it in the 80s. White is planning to play knight to d5, so he defends the c2 pawn in advance. The other option is to play rook f to d1 instead. The idea of bishop c4 is to prepare for the move knight d5 and to prevent the advance of the c pawn to c4. Say after knight d5, knight takes on d5, e4 takes on d5, and then say black would be able to go queen b5 or queen c7, and white would not be able to play pawn to c4. At the time when the game was played, rook to a4 was a novelty, and that was Karpov's new idea. The purpose of the move rook to a4 is to transfer the rook to b4, and by doing that he would take away the b5 square from the black queen. All that is done again in preparation for knight d5, and by playing rook to a4 and then rook to b4, white is going to make the knight d5 move more effective, because then the black queen would not have the b5 square available to it. Finally, white's done with all the preparation, and now he's able to play knight to d5. So in this position now, white is going to have a spatial advantage on the queen side, and black is going to have the same on the king side, especially with his pawns on e5 and f5. So the position is still roughly balanced, but unfortunately Portisch made a couple of mistakes and went down pretty quickly here. This move surrenders the bishop and is probably not very good. It was better to exchange the bishops on e2. Without the light squared bishop, black will suffer, and white's light squared bishop is going to become very strong because it doesn't have a counterpart. And this is a second step in the same wrong direction. Again, black just weakens the light squares even further, and then when the light squared bishop from e2 gets transferred to g4 and then to e6, black's light squares are going to become really weak, and it also makes his bishop on e7 quite passive. It's interesting to see how the two bishops are placed next to each other, but one of them is very strong and the other one is just shut down by its own pawn. So because of that, white's much better here. One of Karpov's strengths as a player when he was at his prime was that he was able to predict what his opponents were going to do, and he would make sure that he does his best to prevent that. So at this point he foresees that black might want to transfer his queen to c5 or to c4 or to d4 and try to exchange the queens. So with the rook maneuver he prevents that exchange, and he also make sure that the light squares are blocked. So he's going to transfer the rook to e4, and by doing that he's going to keep black's pawns on the dark squares. White has basically achieved the ideal placement of all his pieces. They can't be improved any further, and he's ready to advance the pawns. He has a numerical pawn advantage on the queen side. It's 4 pawns against 3 pawns, and his plan is very simple: just advance b4, c4, c5, and then maybe d6. And once the d pawn starts rolling, it's going to be really hard for black to stop it. Strategically, the game is over because white has the pieces that are much more active. The b7 pawn is quite weak, and the d pawn is a passed pawn. And if white wins the b7 pawn, then also the c pawn is going to go ahead. So, realizing that he strategically lost, I guess Portisch started to try to complicate the game as much as possible, but he didn't succeed at that too much. If you just look at how well the white pieces are centralized and compare them to the black pieces, which are sitting on the back rank, or the bishop is sitting on g5, not really coordinated with each other, it's obvious that white has a huge advantage. It may seem that the white king is weak because there's no pawn on the g-file to cover it, but in reality the white pieces are so active and the black pieces are quite passive, so black really has no soldiers to attack the white king, so this isn't really a problem for Karpov here. Now the b7 pawn has fallen, so white has 2 passed pawns, and even though there are bishops of opposite color, it may seem that black has some chance of setting up a blockade, but really because there are still queens and rooks on the board, it's not going to be possible to set up the blockade. There's nothing to stop c6 to c7 to c8, so the game lasted only a couple more moves. Now the bishop is attacking the c8 square, so white's going to promote on the next move, and Portisch resigned. It's a very nice game by Karpov, one of the several games that kind of showed the typical plans for white in this pawn structure.